I kissed my wife Vanessa goodbye at the curbside check-in of JFK Airport and watched her walk through the sliding glass doors with that confident stride I had admired for 10 years. She turned back, once blew me a kiss, and disappeared into the terminal for her business trip to Miami. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding, feeling the fatigue of a 68-year-old man who just wanted to go home to his favorite armchair. But as I merged back into traffic, the silence in the back seat felt heavy, almost suffocating. My 8-year-old son Toby was staring out the window, his knuckles white as he gripped his seatbelt. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw a tear slide down his cheek. I asked him what was wrong, expecting him to say he missed his mother already. Instead, he whispered 6 words that stopped my heart cold. "Dad, we cannot go home." I pulled the car onto the shoulder of the highway, cars flying past us at 70 miles per hour, shaking the frame of my SUV. I turned around and looked at my son. He was trembling. I asked him why. He looked at me with eyes far too old for his face and said, "I heard Mom on the phone in the bathroom this morning. She told someone that tonight is the last night for the old man. She said the house will be ashes by morning." I froze. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my arthritis flared. In that second, the mask of my perfect marriage did not just crack, it shattered. I did not go home. I drove to a parking lot 2 blocks away from my house, killed the lights, and waited. 10 minutes later, I saw a truck pull up to my driveway. It was not a delivery. It was my wife, the woman who was supposed to be in the air flying to Miami, and she was not home. If you are watching this, hit the like button and subscribe, because what I am about to tell you is a lesson in why you should never underestimate a man just because he has gray hair. Let me tell you where I am watching from in the comments below. My name is William Carter. I am 68 years old, and for the last decade I thought I was the luckiest man in New York. I made my fortune in construction, building skyscrapers that define the Manhattan skyline. I retired with dignity, with a portfolio of assets that would make a banker weep, and with a beautiful young wife, Vanessa, who was 36. People whispered, of course. They called her a gold digger. They called me a fool. But when we had Toby through IVF, I thought we had silenced them all. We were a family. I gave her everything. A $4 million historic villa in Westchester, vacations in the Alps, a lifestyle most people only see in movies. I thought I had bought loyalty with love. I was wrong. Sitting on the shoulder of the Van Wyck Expressway, watching the hazard lights blink on the dashboard, I tried to rationalize what Toby had said. Children have active imaginations. Maybe she was talking about a project. Maybe she was talking about a movie. But Toby was not a normal child. He was observant. He was quiet. He was my son, and the terror in his eyes was real. He was not crying for attention. He was crying because he was terrified for his father. I looked at him in the mirror again. I asked him if he was sure. He nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. He told me she said it to Gavin. Gavin. The name hit me like a physical blow. Gavin was her personal trainer. The man I paid $300 an hour to come to our home gym and help my wife stay fit. A man I had welcomed into my house, offered water to shake hands with. I merged back into traffic, but I did not take the exit for our street. My mind was racing, calculating variables just like I used to do when a building project was going sideways. If Vanessa was planning something for tonight, going home was not an option. But running away without proof was not my style either. I needed to see. I needed to know. I drove to a neighborhood 2 streets over, a place where the houses were close enough to walk, but far enough to remain unseen. I parked the car under the heavy shade of an oak tree and turned off the engine. It was 8:30 in the evening. The sun had set, and the streetlights were flickering on. Toby asked me what we were doing. I told him we were playing a game, a spy game. I told him he had to be very quiet, quieter than he had ever been in his life. He nodded, trusting me implicitly. That trust broke my heart, because I knew that after tonight, his world would never be the same. We waited. The silence in the car was thick. I watched the digital clock on the dashboard tick away the minutes. 8:40, 8:50, 9 o'clock. Then headlights swept across the street. A white panel van, unmarked, no logos, looking like a generic contractor vehicle, turned the corner and rolled slowly down the street toward my house. It did not park in the driveway. It parked on the street right in front of the blind spot of the neighbor's security camera. I knew that blind spot because I had pointed it out to the neighbor 3 years ago. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Even in the dim light, the silhouette was unmistakable. The broad shoulders, the athletic build. Gavin. My stomach churned with a mix of nausea and rage, but the real blow came seconds later. The passenger door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was wearing a hoodie and dark jeans, looking nothing like the corporate wife in the power suit I had dropped at the airport 2 hours ago. But I knew the walk. I knew the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. It was Vanessa. She was supposed to be at 30,000 feet, sipping champagne in first class, on her way to a conference in Miami. Instead, she was standing on the pavement outside our home, scanning the street with the nervous energy of a criminal. They did not go to the front door. They went around the back, through the garden gate that I always kept oiled so it would not squeak. I looked at Toby. He had his hands over his mouth, his eyes wide. He recognized them too. He did not say a word, but his silence screamed louder than any accusation. I needed to get closer, but I could not take Toby with me, and I could not leave him alone. I was trapped. But then I remembered who I was. I was William Carter. I did not get to where I was by being unprepared. 6 months ago, I had noticed small things. Withdrawals from the joint account that were just below the notification limit. Whispered phone calls that ended when I entered the room. Vanessa asking detailed questions about the new fire suppression system I had installed during the renovation. She had insisted we increase the fire insurance coverage, claiming that historic homes were tinderboxes. At the time, I thought she was being prudent. Now I realized she was being preparatory. Because of those nagging doubts, the instincts that had saved me millions in business deals, I had done something I never told her about. I had installed a secondary hardwired security system, hidden cameras and microphones in the common areas, and most importantly, in the utility room in the basement. They operated on a separate server, independent of the main smart home system she controlled from her phone. I pulled out my iPad from my briefcase. My hands were shaking not from age, but from adrenaline. I opened the secure app and logged in. The screen flickered to life. The connection was strong. I saw the living room. It was dark. Then a flashlight beam cut through the gloom. They were inside. I switched the camera view to the kitchen. They were moving quickly. Gavin was carrying 2 large red plastic canisters, jerry cans, the kind you use for gasoline. Vanessa was holding a flashlight, guiding him. They were not taking things out. They were bringing things in. I switched to the audio feed. The sound was crisp. Vanessa was whispering. She told him to be careful not to drip anything on the hardwood yet. She said they needed to stage it in the basement first. She said it had to look like a leak from the main intake. Gavin grunted. He asked if she was sure the old man was not coming back early. Vanessa laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that made my skin crawl. She said I was a creature of habit. She said I would drive home, put Toby to bed, drink my single malt scotch, and be asleep by 10:30. She said I slept like the dead anyway, so this would just make it permanent. I sat there in the dark car, listening to my wife plan my murder. I looked at Toby. He was watching the screen over my shoulder. I tried to turn it off to spare him, but he grabbed my arm. He whispered that he wanted to see. He needed to know that he wasn't crazy. I switched the camera to the basement view. This was the most high-definition camera I had. It was pointed directly at the utility panel where the gas main entered the house. I saw Gavin kneel down by the pipes. He took a heavy wrench from his belt. He wasn't tightening the valve. He was loosening the coupling on the main line before the safety shut off. Vanessa was standing behind him holding the jerry cans. She was pouring a clear liquid onto the rags she had piled around the base of the water heater. The pilot light on the water heater was a small blue flame flickering behind its guard. They were building a bomb. A massive fuel-air explosive that would level the house the moment the gas concentration reached the pilot light. Or maybe they were setting a timer. I watched Gavin pull out a device. It looked like a kitchen timer taped to a mechanism. He was setting it. Vanessa asked how long they had. Gavin said 2 hours. He said that was enough time for the gas to fill the basement and seep up through the vents into the bedrooms. He said one spark from the timer or the pilot light would do the rest. 2 hours. It was 9:15. They were setting the stage for an 11:15 detonation, a time when they expected me and my son to be in our beds. My first instinct was to call the police, to send the SWAT team in. But as I watched them, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. If I called the police now, they would be arrested for attempted arson, maybe attempted murder. They would get lawyers. They would claim it was a misunderstanding. They would get bail. Vanessa would use her share of our joint assets to fight me. It would be a messy public divorce, and she might even fight for custody of Toby, claiming I was unfit or paranoid. No, that was not enough. They were trying to burn me alive. They were trying to kill my son. I did not just want them arrested. I wanted them destroyed. I wanted to dismantle their lives piece by piece until they had nothing left but the ashes they intended for me. I started the car. Toby looked at me terrified. He asked if we were going to the police. I told him no. I told him we were going to a hotel. I told him we were going to be ghosts. I drove into the city to the St. Regis. I had been a client there for 30 years. The manager knew me by name. I pulled up to the valet, handed him the keys, and walked in with Toby as if we were just there for a late dinner. I asked for a suite on a high floor, paid with my corporate black card, which Vanessa did not have access to, and asked for total discretion. Once we were in the room, I ordered room service for Toby, a burger and a milkshake. He ate it in silence, his eyes glued to the TV, but I knew he wasn't watching the cartoons. He was processing the trauma. I sat at the desk and opened the iPad again. Vanessa and Gavin were leaving the house. I saw them on the exterior cameras. They got back into the white van. They didn't drive away immediately. They sat there for a moment. I saw Vanessa lean over and kiss him. It was a passionate, celebrating kiss. The kind of kiss you give someone when you think you have just won the lottery. They drove off. I looked at the time. 9:45. The house was filling with gas. The rags were soaked. The timer was ticking. I picked up my phone. I did not dial 911. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Mike O'Malley. Mike was a former NYPD detective who now ran a high-end private security firm. He owed me a favor. A big one. I had paid for his daughter's experimental cancer treatment 5 years ago when his insurance denied it. He had told me then that if I ever needed a body buried or a life saved, I just had to call. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Carter?" "Mike," I said. "I have a situation. A code red at my residence." His voice changed instantly. "Talk to me. My wife and her lover just rigged my basement to blow. They cut the gas line and set an accelerant. I have it all on video. I am safe. My son is safe. We are at the St. Regis." "Jesus, Bill, I'm calling the bomb squad." "No," I said firmly. "Do not call the police. Not yet. Bill, you're talking about a gas explosion in a residential neighborhood." "I know. That's why I need you to get over there right now. You and your best tech. I need you to enter the house. I'll give you the codes. I need you to neutralize the threat. Turn off the gas. Disarm the device. Open the windows. Vent the place, but do not report it." Bill, that's insane. Why? Because if the police come now, they get arrested tonight. And that is too easy. I want them to think they succeeded. Or better yet, I want them to panic when they realize they failed. I want to catch them in a lie so deep they can never climb out. I need 24 hours, Mike. Can you give me that? There was a long pause. You're asking me to tamper with a crime scene. I'm asking you to save my house and help me protect my son from a monster. You saw the video. I sent him the clip from the iPad. He watched it while I held the line. I heard him curse softly. Okay, Mike said. I'm 10 minutes out. I'll handle it. But Bill, whatever game you're playing, make sure you win. I intend to, I said. I hung up and watched the camera feed. 10 minutes later, I saw Mike's black SUV pull up. He and another man entered the house. I watched them go down to the basement. I watched them turn off the gas main. I watched them carefully place the timer in a forensic bag. I watched them open the windows. My house was safe. But my marriage was dead, and the war had just begun. At 10 o'clock sharp, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. The caller ID showed her picture, a photo I had taken of her on a yacht in Italy, smiling wind in her hair. It felt like looking at a stranger. I motioned for Toby to be silent. I took a deep breath, summoned 40 years of boardroom poker face, and answered. Hey, honey, I said. My voice sounded groggy, like I had just woken up from a nap. Hi, darling, Vanessa's voice chirped. It was bright fake, echoing slightly. I just got to the hotel in Miami. The flight was exhausting. I just wanted to call and say goodnight. She was lying through her teeth. She wasn't in Miami. She was probably 10 miles away waiting for the boom. Oh, that's good, I said, rubbing my eyes to make my voice sound thick. I was just dozing off in the chair. Toby is asleep upstairs. That's sweet, she said. Did you check the house, everything locked up? Yeah, I said. Actually, it's funny you called. I woke up because I smelled something weird, like rotten eggs. I think it might be a gas leak. I was just about to go down to the basement to check the pilot light. Maybe I should flip the light switch down there to see. There was a sudden sharp intake of breath on the other end. No, she screamed. It wasn't a worried scream. It was a panicked, primal scream. What? I asked, playing the confused old man. Why are you yelling? Don't go down there, Bill, she stammered. Her voice was trembling. If you smell gas, you shouldn't use the lights. It's dangerous. Just get out of the house. Go outside. Right now. She was terrified. Not because she loved me, but because if I went down there and flipped a switch, I might blow the house up early. Or worse, if I went down there and didn't blow up, I would find the device. Or maybe, just maybe, she realized that if I died right now while she was on the phone with me, the timeline wouldn't match her alibi. You're probably right, I said slowly. It's getting really strong. I feel a bit dizzy. You know, I think I'll just go check it out anyway. I have a lighter in my pocket. I can use the flame to see if... Bill, stop! She shrieked. Get out of the house! Get Toby and get out, please! Okay, I said. I'm going. You seem very upset, honey. Is everything okay in Miami? I'm just worried about you, she lied. Please call me when you're outside. I will, I said, and I hung up. I looked at Toby. He was staring at me with awe. She thinks we're there, he whispered. She thinks we're about to die, I corrected him. I waited 5 minutes. Then I turned off my phone. I wanted her to sit in the silence. I wanted her to watch the clock. I wanted her to wait for the explosion that would never come. I wanted her to wonder if I had made it out or if I was lying on the floor suffocating. I wanted her to feel a fraction of the fear she had inflicted on my son. The next morning, the sun rose over Central Park, casting a golden light into our hotel suite. I had not slept. I had spent the night reviewing documents on my laptop. I had a meeting scheduled with Sarah Jenkins at 8 a.m. Sarah was the best trust and estate lawyer in New York. She was a shark in a Chanel suit. I walked into her office with Toby holding my hand. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Sarah," I said, "I need to restructure everything. Today." She looked at my face, then at Toby. "What happened, Bill?" "Vanessa tried to kill me last night," I said. Sarah dropped her pen. I explained the situation. I showed her the video. I told her about Mike's intervention. "We need to move fast," I said. "She thinks I'm either dead or in the hospital, or she thinks the plan failed and she's panicking. Either way, she's going to make a move on the money." "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked. "I want to cut her off. Completely. I want to activate the bad boy clause in the prenuptial, but I want to go further. I want to transfer the title of the Westchester house. Today." "To whom?" "To a shell company," I said. "A holding company owned by a trust. And the sole beneficiary of that trust is Toby." Sarah nodded, typing furiously. "We can do a quitclaim deed. If she hasn't filed for divorce or probate yet, you still have full executive power over the separate assets. The house was yours before the marriage." "Do it," I said. "And the credit cards. She has a supplementary card on my Amex Centurion. The limit is $500,000. "I'll freeze it," Sarah said. "I'll flag it for fraud." "No," I said. "Don't just freeze it. Change the status. Report it as stolen by an unauthorized user. Let the bank trigger the alert when she tries to use it." "That's aggressive, Bill," Sarah warned. "She tried to incinerate my son," I replied. "Aggressive is an understatement." "What about your liquid assets?" "Move them," I said. "Everything in the joint accounts. Leave $500. Move the rest to the blind trust. If she tries to withdraw cash, I want her to find dust." "Bill," Sarah said, pausing, "you know this is going to trigger a war. She will come for you. She will claim you are stealing marital assets." "Let her," I said. "I have a video of her pouring gasoline in my basement. I want her to come for me. I want her to walk right into the trap." We spent the next 2 hours signing papers. By 10 a.m. on paper, I was a man with almost no personal assets. Everything was locked down, transferred, or shielded. The house she thought she was going to inherit was no longer mine. The money she wanted to spend was gone. Now it was time to see what the hunter would do when she realized the prey was still alive. I turned my phone back on. It exploded with notifications. 50 missed calls, 20 texts. "Bill, are you okay? Bill, why aren't you answering? I'm flying back right now. Call me." And then the tone changed. "Where is my son? If you don't answer, I'm calling the police." She was pivoting. She realized the house hadn't blown up. She realized I wasn't answering. She was switching from the grieving widow to the worried mother. She was going to use Toby as a weapon. I looked at the tracking app on my phone. I still had access to her location because she was on the family plan. She wasn't in Miami. She was in a coffee shop 3 miles from our house. She was waiting. I checked the credit card alerts. Attempted transaction Starbucks. $12.50. Status declined. Code stolen card. She knew. The game was on. I looked at Toby. "Ready for part 2? He nodded bravely. "What do we do now, Dad?" "Now," I said, "we let her make the next move. We let her think she has the upper hand." I knew exactly what she would do next. A narcissist who loses control does not retreat. They attack. She would try to paint me as the villain. She would use my age. She would use my silence. She would tell the world I was a senile kidnapping monster. And I was going to let her. Because the higher she built her tower of lies, the harder she would fall when I pulled the foundation out from under her. My phone rang again. It wasn't Vanessa this time. It was the local police precinct. "Mr. Carter," a stern voice asked. "This is Sergeant Miller. We have a report from your wife that you have abducted your son and are suffering from a mental health crisis. We need to know your location immediately." I smiled. It had begun. "Officer," I said calmly, "I am not abducted. I am at the St. Regis Hotel, and I think you should come here. There is something you need to see." I hung up. I looked at the iPad one last time. The house was empty, silent, and safe, but the storm was coming to room 1408, and I was ready. The digital clock on the mahogany nightstand of the St. Regis Hotel suite flipped to 9:58. The room was submerged in a heavy velvet silence, broken only by the rhythmic breathing of my son Toby, who was curled up in the king-sized bed under a down comforter. He was pretending to sleep, his small back rigid, waiting for the explosion he thought was coming. I sat in the wingback chair by the window, a glass of untouched water in my hand, staring at my phone as if it were a bomb detonator. I knew she would call. Vanessa was a creature of meticulous habits, especially when she was constructing a lie. She needed to establish her alibi. She needed the digital footprint of a call from Miami routed through a cell tower that would place her hundreds of miles away from the crime scene. At least that is what she thought she was doing. I checked the tracking app on my secure server one last time. She was not in Miami. She was sitting in a 24-hour diner less than 3 miles from our house in Westchester. She was close enough to hear the siren, but far enough to play the grieving widow who rushed home from the airport. At 10 o'clock exactly, the phone screen lit up. The photo of her smiling face, taken on our anniversary in Capri, seemed to mock me. It was a face that had whispered promises of eternity while her mind was calculating the actuarial tables of my life expectancy. My hand hovered over the device. This was the performance of my life. I had negotiated billion-dollar contracts with steel tycoons and navigated union strikes that threatened to bankrupt me, but nothing had prepared me for the task of talking to my wife while she waited for me to burn. I cleared my throat, forcing a gravelly, sleep-filled texture into my voice. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello," I mumbled, letting the word drag, as if pulling it from the depths of a dream. "Hey, honey." Vanessa's voice chirped through the speaker. It was too bright, too loud, laden with a performative exhaustion that only a guilty conscience could manufacture. "I just got to the hotel room. The humidity in Miami is awful, even at night. I miss you already." I closed my eyes, visualizing her sitting in that diner, checking her watch. The disconnect between her chirpy tone and the gruesome reality of what she had done in my basement an hour ago made my stomach turn. She was not just a liar. She was a sociopath. I rubbed the receiver against my cheek to simulate the friction of a pillow. "That is good," I said, keeping my voice low and thick. "I am glad you are safe. I was just dozing off in the chair. Toby is out cold." "Aw, give him a kiss for me," she said. The sweetness in her voice was nauseating. "Did you remember to lock the back gate? You know how I worry." She was checking the perimeter, ensuring the trap was sealed. "Yeah," I said. "Everything is locked up tight. Actually, it is funny you called." I paused. I let the silence hang for 3 seconds. 4. I needed her to lean in. I needed her heart rate to spike. "What is funny?" she asked, a razor-thin edge of tension entering her voice. "I woke up because I smelled something weird," I said slowly, innocently. "Like rotten eggs. It is really strong down here in the living room. I think it might be a gas leak." There was a sudden sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. It was the sound of a plan disintegrating. I continued piling on the pressure. I was just about to go down to the basement to check the pilot light on the water heater. It is dark down there, so I was going to flip the light switch to see where the smell is coming from. "No," she screamed. It was not a scream of concern. It was a primal shriek of panic. If I went down there and flipped a switch now, 2 things could happen in her mind. 1, the house explodes early, messing up her carefully crafted timeline and alibi. Or 2, and this was her real fear, I would go down there, survive and find the device Gavin had planted. She needed me asleep. She needed the gas to saturate the house for another hour, to ensure total incineration. "Bill, stop," she stammered, her voice trembling with a terror she could not hide. "Do not go down there. If you smell gas, you should not use the lights. It is dangerous. You know that." I played the confused, stubborn old man she thought I was. "I don't know, Vanessa. It is probably nothing. My nose has been playing tricks on me lately. I have a lighter in my pocket. I can just use the flame to see if the pilot light is out." "Bill, are you listening to me?" she yelled, her voice cracking. "Get out of the house. Get Toby and get out right now. Do not touch anything. Do not check anything. Just leave." I could hear the background noise on her end. It wasn't the ambient hum of a hotel room. It was the clatter of silverware and the low murmur of a diner. She was losing control. She was terrified that her perfect murder was about to turn into a botched investigation. Okay, calm down," I said, sounding defensive. "You do not have to yell. I am going. I just wanted to make sure the house was safe." "It is not safe," she insisted, breathless. "Just go outside. Wait on the lawn. Call me when you are out." I smiled in the darkness of the hotel room. I had her. I had forced her to save my life, to go on record telling me to leave the house. It was a chaotic pivot, a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, but it confirmed everything. If she truly believed I was in danger, she would have told me to call the fire department. She didn't. She told me to wait on the lawn. She wanted me out of the house so the explosion wouldn't happen yet, or she wanted me out so she could call Gavin to abort. "Okay," I said. "I am grabbing Toby. I am going out the front door. I will call you back in 5 minutes. Hurry, Bill, please." I hung up the phone and set it gently on the desk. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was the silence of victory. I looked over at Toby. He had sat up in bed watching me with wide, fearful eyes. "She thinks we are there," he whispered. "She thinks she is in control," I corrected him, walking over to sit on the edge of the bed. "But she is not. We are the ones writing the story now." I checked my watch. It was 10:10. Across town in my empty house, the windows were open. The gas was off, and Mike's security team had already removed the timer and the accelerant. The house was cold and silent. Vanessa was sitting in that diner staring at her phone, sweating. She was waiting for the boom that would never come. She was waiting for the call I would never make. I turned off my phone completely. I wanted her to sit in that fear. I wanted her to imagine me walking out the front door or perhaps fainting from the fumes before I could make it. I wanted her to wonder if I was alive or dead. I wanted the silence to stretch until it snapped her composure in half. For the next 8 hours, while she spiraled into panic, wondering why her bomb hadn't gone off and why her husband wasn't answering, I would be here in the safety of the St. Regis, preparing the financial and legal slaughter that awaited her at sunrise. The physical trap had failed. Now the psychological torture would begin. I poured myself the water I had been holding, took a long sip, and opened my laptop. It was time to get to work. The sun that rose over Manhattan the next morning did not feel like the start of a new day. It felt like the cold, hard light of an interrogation room. I had not slept. While Toby finally succumbed to exhaustion in the king-sized bed of the St. Regis suite, I had spent the dark hours staring at the ceiling, dismantling my life in my head. I had built skyscrapers that withstood hurricanes, yet I had allowed a termite to live in the foundation of my own home. But termites do not know that the structure they are eating is made of steel until they break their teeth. At 7:45, I woke Toby. We dressed in silence. He put on his favorite dinosaur t-shirt, the one Vanessa usually forbade him from wearing in public because it was not designer. I put on a charcoal suit, a bespoke piece from Savile Row that I usually reserved for board meetings where I intended to fire someone, in a way that was exactly what I was doing today. We took the elevator down to the lobby. The world outside was bustling, oblivious to the fact that I was a man who had narrowly avoided incineration 12 hours ago. We got into the black town car I had summoned. I gave the driver the address of a glass monolith in Midtown. Jenkins and Associates. Sarah Jenkins was waiting for us. Sarah was not the kind of lawyer you hired to dispute a parking ticket. She was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to erase a competitor from the map without leaving a fingerprint. She was 45, sharp as a scalpel, and had been managing my complex estate planning for 15 years. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had helped dig the holes. When we walked into her corner office, she took one look at my face and the grip I had on Toby's hand, and she told her assistant to hold all calls. She poured me a black coffee and handed Toby an iPad with headphones so he could watch a movie in the corner. She knew that what we were about to discuss was not for the ears of an 8-year-old, even one who had saved my life. I sat down and placed my phone on her mahogany desk. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I told her everything. The whisper in the car, the stakeout, the video of Vanessa and Gavin in the basement, the phone call where I played the confused old man. Sarah listened with the stillness of a predator. She did not gasp. She did not offer empty platitudes. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching furiously. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked me in the eye. She asked if I wanted them arrested immediately. I told her no. I told her that an arrest was too clean. I told her that Vanessa believed she was playing a long game waiting for an accident to cash out. I wanted to show her that the game had been rigged from the start. I wanted to cut the financial legs out from under her before she even realized she was falling. Sarah nodded. She opened a thick file on her desk. It was labeled The Carter Estate. This is where the secret I had kept from Vanessa for 10 years became my weapon. Vanessa believed she had married a wealthy retiree. She saw the house, the cars, the lifestyle, and she assumed she had access to the vault. She assumed that under New York equitable distribution laws, she owned half of everything. She was wrong. I looked at Sarah and told her to activate the blind trust protocols. Vanessa did not know that I was not technically the owner of the fortune she was trying to kill me for. Years ago, before I ever met her, when I was still building my empire, I had created a complex web of financial protections. I had seen too many of my peers destroyed by divorces and lawsuits. I had learned that ownership is a liability, but control is power. I explained to Sarah that I wanted to transfer the title of the Westchester house immediately. She looked at me over her glasses. She reminded me that the house was the marital residence. She warned me that transferring it could be seen as dissipation of assets in a divorce court. I leaned forward. I told her that under the prenuptial agreement which Vanessa had signed without reading thoroughly, because she was too busy picking out diamond earrings, there was a specific clause. Clause 7C, the bad boy clause, or in this case, the bad girl clause. It stated that any proven act of infidelity or criminal intent against the spouse nullified all claims to marital assets and triggered an immediate reversion of property rights to the primary grantor. I had the video of her pouring gasoline. I had the proof of criminal intent. Sarah smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. She pulled a document from the file. It was a quitclaim deed. She told me we could transfer the property into a shell company, an LLC registered in Delaware, anonymous and untouchable. I told her to do it. I told her the name of the company, the Phoenix Group. A little dramatic perhaps, but fitting for a house that was supposed to burn down. We signed the papers right there. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but the stroke was decisive. With that signature, the $4 million villa that Vanessa was currently speeding toward, hoping to find ashes, no longer belonged to William and Vanessa Carter. It belonged to a corporate entity solely controlled by a trust for the benefit of Tobias Carter. Vanessa was now trespassing in a stranger's house. But I wasn't done. The house was just the shelter. I needed to take away the sustenance. I asked Sarah about the liquidity. She pulled up my accounts on her large monitor. Vanessa had a supplementary card on my American Express Centurion account. The black card. It had a limit that could buy a small island. She used it for everything. Her clothes, her spa treatments, the dinners she paid for Gavin. She treated it like a magic wand. Sarah asked if I wanted to cancel the card. I shook my head. Canceling it would just result in a declined transaction, a mild inconvenience, a cashier saying, "I am sorry, it is not going through." That was not enough. I wanted humiliation. I wanted legal jeopardy. I told Sarah to report the card as stolen. Not lost. Stolen. I wanted her to flag it for unauthorized usage by a third party. Sarah raised an eyebrow. She asked if I was sure. She reminded me that reporting it as stolen when I knew she had it was aggressive. I looked at Toby in the corner, his small face illuminated by the iPad screen. I remembered the fear in his voice when he said we couldn't go home. I told Sarah that a woman who tries to murder her husband has lost the privilege of authorized usage. I told her to flag it. I wanted the next time she tried to buy a latte or a tank of gas to result in a call to the police. I wanted the system to treat her like a common thief. Then we moved to the bank accounts. We had a joint checking account for household expenses. It currently held about $50,000. Money she intended to use to pay for my funeral, no doubt. I told Sarah to drain it. Leave $500. Just enough to keep the account open so she wouldn't get a notification that it was closed. Move the rest. Every cent. Transfer it to the offshore holding company in the Cayman Islands. Sarah typed furiously. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, executing trades and transfers that would normally take weeks done in seconds by the power of digital banking. I watched the numbers on the screen drop. 50,000 became 500. Then came the life insurance. The big prize. The $10 million policy she was drooling over. The policy that Gavin had probably assured her would set them up for life in some tropical paradise. I told Sarah to change the beneficiary. It was currently set to Vanessa Carter 50% and Toby Carter 50%, with Vanessa as the trustee for Toby until he was 21. It was a standard setup for a loving family. It was a death warrant in my current reality. I told Sarah to revoke Vanessa's status completely. I wanted 100% to go to the Toby Carter Trust, and I wanted to appoint a new trustee. Sarah asked who. I looked at her. I told her she was the trustee, her and Mike O'Malley. I trusted my lawyer and my security guard more than the woman who slept in my bed. Sarah nodded solemnly. She printed the forms. I signed them. The ink was still wet when she scanned them and uploaded them to the insurer's portal. It was done. In less than an hour, I had stripped Vanessa of everything she thought she owned. She was walking around, thinking she was a wealthy widow in waiting. In reality, she was a destitute trespasser with a stolen credit card and a looming prison sentence. I sat back in the leather chair. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, hollow ache in my chest. I had loved her. That was the tragedy of it. Despite the age gap, despite the whispers, I had truly loved her. I had believed her lies because I wanted them to be true. I had built a fortress to protect us from the world, never realizing I had locked myself in with the enemy. Sarah poured me another coffee. She asked what the next step was. I told her that now we wait. I checked my watch. It was 9:15 in the morning. Vanessa would be at the house by now. She would be standing in the driveway staring at the intact structure. She would be confused. She would be checking her phone, wondering why I hadn't called. She would try to enter the house. She still had her key, but she would find the locks changed. No, I corrected myself. I hadn't changed the locks. That would tip her off too early. I wanted her to go inside. I wanted her to smell the fresh air where the gas should have been. I wanted her to see that the basement door was locked with a new heavy-duty padlock that Mike had installed. She would panic. She would try to buy something to calm her nerves. Maybe a coffee. Maybe breakfast. And that is when the card would fail. That is when the reality would start to set in. I stood up and walked over to Toby. I took the headphones off his ears. I asked him if he was hungry. He nodded. I told him we were going to get the best pancakes in New York City. I turned to Sarah. I told her to keep her phone on. The storm was about to make landfall. As we walked out of the office, I checked my phone for the first time in hours. The notifications were piling up. Missed calls from Vanessa. Texts that ranged from feigned worry to barely concealed anger. Where are you? Why aren't you home? I'm at the house, where is everyone? And then the most recent one sent 2 minutes ago. My card isn't working. Call the bank. Now. I smiled. It was a grim, humorless smile. She was giving me orders. She still thought she was the queen of the castle. She had no idea she was already in checkmate. I put the phone back in my pocket. I did not reply. Let her sweat. Let her scream at the barista. Let her call the customer service line and be told she is a fraud risk. I took Toby's hand and walked out into the sunshine. For the first time in a long time, the city felt clean. The air was crisp. I was 68 years old, homeless by choice and effectively single. But I had my son. And I had the truth. And for now, that was enough. The real war would start when she found us, but I was no longer the prey. I was the architect of her downfall, and the blueprints were finally complete. I watched the blue dot on my tracking app move along the highway. It was a digital ghost representing my wife speeding back toward a crime scene that no longer existed. She was moving fast, 15 miles over the limit. In her mind, she was racing toward a tragedy she had orchestrated, preparing her performance of the grieving widow. She was probably rehearsing the scream she would unleash when she saw the smoldering ruins of the home I had built. She was expecting fire trucks, police tape, and the smell of charred timber. But I knew what she would find. At 9:30 in the morning, the white van turned onto our quiet, tree-lined street in Westchester. I wasn't there, but I could see it as clearly as if I were standing on the lawn. The street was silent. There were no sirens wailing in the distance. No neighbors gathered on the sidewalks in their bathrobes whispering in horror. There was just the house standing stoic and untouched under the morning sun, the brick facade looking as solid as it had for 100 years. I imagined the air leaving her lungs. I imagined Gavin slamming on the brakes, the van skidding slightly on the asphalt. They must have sat there for a moment, the engine idling, staring at the structure that refused to fall. It was the first crack in their reality. They didn't park in the driveway. They left the van on the street, likely afraid that the house was a delayed fuse waiting to blow. I checked the perimeter cameras on my iPad. Vanessa jumped out first. She wasn't wearing her business suit anymore. She was still in the dark clothes from the night before, looking disheveled, manic. Gavin followed, looking less like a tough guy, and more like a man realizing he had just made a very bad bet. They didn't run to the front door calling my name. They didn't check the bedrooms to see if Toby and I were safe. That would be the reaction of an innocent person. No, they ran straight around the back to the basement entrance. They needed to know why the timer hadn't ticked down to 0. But Mike O'Malley is worth every penny I pay him. He hadn't just disarmed the trap, he had sanitized the scene. When Mike and his team went in the night before, they didn't just turn off the gas. They removed the jerry cans. They bagged the rags soaked in accelerant. They took the timer. They even scrubbed the floor where the gasoline had dripped. When Vanessa threw open that basement door expecting the heavy stench of gas or the heat of a fire, she found nothing but cool, clean air. The water heater hummed softly. The pilot light flickered behind its glass guard, mocking her. It was as if the last 12 hours had never happened. Except for one detail. Mike had followed my instructions perfectly. He had replaced the padlock on the utility closet door. The old one was a standard master lock she had the key to. The new one was a heavy-duty military-grade steel lock. It was a message. Someone was here. Someone knows. I watched the camera feed in the kitchen. They burst in through the back door. Vanessa was frantic. She was tearing at her hair, her eyes darting around the room. Where are they? I could read her lips on the high-definition feed. Where is the old man? She ran to the hallway. Bill Toby. Her voice wasn't filled with relief. It was filled with terror. If I wasn't dead and I wasn't home, then I was somewhere else. And if I was somewhere else, I was a loose end, a very dangerous loose end. She ran upstairs. I switched the camera view to the master bedroom. She threw open the closet doors. She saw the gaps in the hangers where my suits used to be. She saw the empty drawer where I kept my passport and emergency cash. She froze. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't a coincidence. I hadn't gone out for milk. I had evacuated. Gavin came into the room behind her. He looked sick. He knows Van, he said. I could hear him clearly through the microphone in the smoke detector. He knows everything. We have to go. We have to run. Shut up, Vanessa screamed at him. She was spiraling. He doesn't know anything. He's old. He's paranoid. Maybe he just smelled the gas and left. Maybe he's at a hotel. The basement was clean, Vanessa, Gavin yelled back. The stuff is gone. Someone cleaned it up. We stick to the plan, she hissed, grabbing his arm. Her nails dug into his bicep. We just need to find him. If he's alive, we can still fix this. We just need to get him back here. She was delusional. Narcissism does that to you. It blinds you to the fact that you have already lost. She truly believed she could talk her way out of attempted murder. I need coffee, she said, her hands shaking uncontrollably. I can't think. I need to get out of this house for a second. It feels like a trap. She was right about that. She grabbed her purse and stormed out. Gavin hesitated, looked around the room one last time as if expecting the walls to close in, and then followed her. They got back into the van. I tracked them. She drove to the upscale coffee shop in the town center, a place where the baristas knew her order and the other soccer moms gathered to gossip. She needed normalcy. She needed to feel like the wealthy Mrs. Carter again, even for 5 minutes. She walked in, leaving Gavin in the car. She ordered a triple-shot latte and a croissant. She looked terrible, but she held her head high, trying to project the image of the woman who owned the town. When it was time to pay, she pulled out the black card. My Centurion card. The card she used to buy Gavin's watches and her own illusions. She tapped it on the reader. Beep. The sound was sharp and final. The barista, a young girl named Sarah, who Vanessa had complained about twice to management, looked at the screen. She frowned. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter. It declined. Vanessa laughed. It was a nervous, brittle sound. That's ridiculous. It's an unlimited card. Try it again. It's probably your machine. The girl tried again. Beep. It says, pick up card, fraud. The girl said, her voice rising slightly so the people in line behind Vanessa could hear. The instructions are to confiscate the card and call the issuer. Vanessa snatched the card back. You will do no such thing. This is my husband's account. There is obviously a mistake. I can't serve you without payment, ma'am, the girl said, crossing her arms. The humiliation was visible. It started at her neck, a flush of red that crept up her face. The people behind her were shifting, whispering. This was the woman who lived in the mansion on the hill, and she couldn't buy a $6 coffee. Vanessa fumbled in her purse for another card. She pulled out the joint Visa. Beep, declined. She pulled out the debit card for the household account. Beep, declined. Insufficient funds. I had drained them all. Every single line of credit, every liquid asset she had access to was gone. She was standing there with a wallet full of plastic that was worth less than the napkins on the counter. She looked at the card reader as if it had betrayed her. But it wasn't the machine. It was me. For the first time, the reality of her situation pierced through her arrogance. She wasn't just a wife whose murder plot had failed. She was a target. Someone had turned off the tap, and there was only one person who could do that. Me. She threw a $20 bill from her emergency cash on the counter, grabbed the coffee, and ran out. She didn't wait for the change. Back in the van, she slammed the door shut. She didn't drink the coffee. She stared at her phone. She opened her banking app. I imagine she saw the zeros. Zero balance. Account frozen. Contact primary account holder. She screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. She beat her hands against the steering wheel until her knuckles were white. "He cut me off!" she shrieked at Gavin. "The bastard cut me off! He knows!" Gavin looked terrified. "We need to leave van, I'm telling you. If he cut the money, the cops are next." "No," she yelled. "If we run, we look guilty. We stay. We fight." She picked up her phone. She dialed my number again. It went straight to voicemail. She threw the phone onto the dashboard. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked at the house in the distance, then back at her phone. A new plan was forming in her eyes. I could see the shift. The panic was receding, replaced by a cold, reptilian survival instinct. If I was cutting her off, she had to strike back. She had to control the narrative before I did. She picked up the phone again. She didn't call me. She didn't call the bank. She dialed 911. "This is Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice breaking into a perfect practiced sob. "Please help me. My husband. I think he's having a breakdown. He's taken our son. He's not answering his phone. He's confused. He has dementia. Please, you have to find him before he hurts himself or my baby." I watched the call log update on my iPad. She had played her hand. She was banking on the fact that the world would believe a crying young mother over a rich old man. She was gambling that she could use the police to find me, drag me into the system, and get me declared incompetent before I could show them the video. It was a bold move. It was a dangerous move. And it was exactly what I had been waiting for. I closed the laptop. I looked at Toby, who was finishing his pancakes. "Get your shoes on, son," I said. "The police are coming to visit." "Are we in trouble?" he asked. "No," I said. "But your mother is about to have a very bad day." I stood up and checked my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look like a man having a breakdown. I looked like a man who was about to go to war. I straightened my tie. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for them to walk into the room. I sat in the plush armchair of the St. Regis suite, watching the news on mute. The ticker at the bottom of the screen scrolled through the usual morning headlines: stocks, weather, politics. But my attention was focused on the police scanner app open on my laptop. Mike had set it up for me, an encrypted link to the Westchester County Dispatch. For the last 20 minutes, it had been quiet. Then the tone changed. "Dispatch to all units," a female voice crackled, calm but urgent. "We have a code 1065. Kidnapping in progress. Complainant is at the 4th precinct. Subject is William Carter, 68 years old, white male. Victim is Tobias Carter, 8 years old." My heart hammered against my ribs. Kidnapping. She had actually done it. I turned up the volume on the laptop. "Subject is the father," the dispatcher continued. "Complainant states the subject is suffering from advanced dementia and is prone to violent hallucinations. He is believed to be armed and dangerous. Approach with extreme caution." Dementia. Violent hallucinations. Armed. She hadn't just reported me missing. She had painted a target on my back. She knew that if the police approached a confused old man who they thought had a gun, they wouldn't ask questions first. They would shoot. She was trying to get the police to finish the job she had failed to do with the gas. I looked at Toby. He was building a tower out of the complimentary hotel notepads, blissfully unaware that his father was now a fugitive. I grabbed my phone. I needed to call Sarah. I needed to call Mike. But before I could dial, a shrill, piercing sound erupted from the device. It was the emergency alert system. The same sound blared from the television. Amber Alert. The screen turned red. My license plate number. My description. Toby's description. Extreme danger. The air in the room seemed to vanish. An Amber Alert was the nuclear option. It meant every phone in New York City was buzzing with my name. It meant every taxi driver, every doorman, every pedestrian was looking for the crazy old man who had stolen a child. I looked out the window at the busy street below. I felt exposed, naked. The St. Regis was a fortress of luxury, but it was also a fishbowl. The staff knew me. The manager knew me. And they had all just received an alert telling them I was mentally unstable and dangerous. I couldn't stay here. I had told the officer on the phone where I was thinking I could control the narrative, thinking I could invite them in for a civilized conversation. I had underestimated Vanessa's ability to weaponize the system. By the time the police arrived here, they wouldn't be coming to talk. They would be coming to breach and clear. They would separate Toby from me immediately for his safety. They would sedate me. And once I was in the system labeled as a dementia patient, my credibility would be zero. We had to move. Now. Toby, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the panic rising in my throat. Put your shoes on. We have to go. Where, he asked, looking at the half-built tower. To another safe house, I said. This one is compromised. I didn't pack the bags. I left the clothes, the toiletries, everything. I only took the laptop, the iPad, and the folder of documents. I grabbed my coat and Toby's jacket. We didn't take the elevator. Elevators are traps. Cameras in closed spaces, nowhere to run. We took the stairs, 14 floors down. My knees ached, a sharp reminder of my age, but I pushed through the pain. We exited through the service door that led into the alleyway, a trick I had learned years ago when avoiding paparazzi during a high-profile merger. The cool air hit my face. The alley smelled of garbage and exhaust fumes. I pulled my cap down low over my eyes. I put my sunglasses on Toby. We walked fast, blending into the mid-morning crowd on Fifth Avenue. I felt eyes on me everywhere. A woman pushing a stroller looked at me, then looked at her phone. I gripped Toby's hand tighter. I wasn't William Carter, the titan of industry. I was a fugitive in my own city. We couldn't take a taxi. Digital payments were tracked and drivers were alert. We couldn't take the subway. Too many cameras. We walked 6 blocks to a nondescript parking garage where Mike kept a fleet of cars for his operatives. I punched in the code on the keypad by the pedestrian door. It beeped green. Inside, sitting under a dusty tarp, was a gray Honda Civic. It was 10 years old, invisible, and registered to a shell corporation that didn't exist. I buckled Toby into the back seat. He was quiet, sensing the danger radiating off me. "Dad," he whispered. "Is Mom coming?" "No," I said, starting the engine. "But she sent her friends." I drove out of the garage and merged into the traffic. I didn't go to another luxury hotel. I drove to Queens to a Holiday Inn near the airport. It was a place for layovers and business travelers who didn't care who was in the room next door. It was anonymous. I checked in using cash and a fake ID that Mike had provided me years ago just in case. The name on the license was Arthur Miller. Once we were in the room, which smelled of lemon polish and stale cigarettes, I turned on the TV. The news was covering it live. A helicopter shot showed the St. Regis entrance. Police cars were swarming the valet stand. A SWAT team was moving into the lobby. I had missed them by 10 minutes. The reporter was breathless. Breaking news in the Carter kidnapping case. Police are currently raiding a hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Vanessa Carter, the distraught mother, is on the scene. The camera cut to Vanessa. She was standing behind the police barricade wearing a white sweater that made her look fragile, angelic. She was weeping into a handkerchief. A police captain was comforting her. She spoke to the cameras. Her voice was trembling, a masterpiece of performance art. Please, she sobbed. Bill, if you can hear me, please, just bring him home. You're confused. You're sick. We love you. We just want to get you help. I know you don't mean to hurt him. Please don't let your illness take our son away. I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. She was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. She had framed the narrative perfectly. If I fought back now, I was just a paranoid old man resisting help. If I released the video of the gas line, she would claim it was a deepfake created by my paranoid mind, or worse, that I had forced her to do it, in a moment of confusion. She had weaponized my age. She had turned my silence into a symptom. I looked at Toby. He was watching his mother on TV. She's lying, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. She doesn't love us. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I felt tired, bone-deep tired. I was fighting a war on two fronts. On one side, a legal battle for my assets. On the other, a battle for my sanity and my freedom. My phone, which I had turned back on to track the news, buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a push notification from my bank. Your accounts have been frozen by court order. She had gotten a judge, an emergency ex parte order. Based on the police report and the imminent danger to the child, a family court judge had frozen everything. My cards, my transfers, my access. I was cut off. I had millions in offshore accounts, but accessing them took time. Right now, I had the cash in my pocket and the car in the lot. I looked at the TV again. The police captain was speaking now. We are expanding the search grid. We have reason to believe Mr. Carter may be heading toward the airport. We are monitoring all flights. They were closing in. I needed to change the game. I couldn't hide forever. Hiding made me look guilty. Hiding proved her point. I needed to confront them, but not on the street, not in a hotel room where they could tackle me. I needed a stage where the only weapon allowed was the truth. I looked at the folder of documents Sarah had given me, the trust deeds, the transfer of ownership, the evidence of Vanessa's fraud. It wasn't enough, not against a dementia diagnosis. I needed something that proved I was sane. I needed a doctor, a real one. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mike. I'm in the wind, Shui, I said. They froze the accounts. I saw, Mike said. You're all over the news, Bill. They have a shoot-to-kill order if you show a weapon. Did you bring a gun? I don't own a gun, Mike. Doesn't matter. Vanessa told them you have a collection of antique pistols. They think you're packing. She's thorough, I muttered. Bill, you need to come in, Mike said. I can't protect you if the NYPD sees you as a threat. If I come in, I lose Toby. She gets temporary custody. She takes him back to that house. If you stay out, you die, Mike said bluntly. Let me bring you in. I'll walk you into the precinct myself. Hands up, lawyers present. We control the surrender. I looked at Toby. He was curled up in a ball on the bed, thumb in his mouth, a habit he hadn't done since he was 4. Mike was right. Running was a young man's game. I had to pivot. Okay, I said, but not the precinct, the court. I surrender to a judge, not a cop. It's Saturday, Bill. Courts are closed. Find one that's open, I snapped. Arraignment court, emergency family hearing. I don't care. Get Sarah on it. I am not letting that woman take my son. I'll try, Mike said. But Bill, stay put. Don't move. They're tracking plates. I hung up. I looked around the dingy hotel room. This was it. The bottom. A billionaire hiding in a Holiday Inn, waiting for the men with guns to come and take his son away. But then I remembered something. The iPad. The cameras at the house. I opened the app. The house was quiet. But then movement. The front door opened. Vanessa walked in. She wasn't alone. She was with 2 uniformed officers. She was giving them a tour, showing them the scene of the crime, where I had supposedly threatened her. She walked them into the kitchen. She pointed at the basement door. She was crying again. But then she did something. She thought the cops weren't looking. She smiled. It was a quick, fleeting smirk directed at the empty room, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. And she looked right at the smoke detector. She knew the camera was there. She had found it. Or maybe Gavin had. She winked. She winked at the camera. At me. She knew I was watching. She was mocking me. That wink was the fuel I needed. It burned away the fatigue. It burned away the fear. She thought she had won. She thought the game was over. She didn't know that the wink was the final nail in her coffin. Because that camera wasn't just a live feed. It was recording to the cloud. And a grieving, terrified mother doesn't wink at the camera while police search for her kidnapped son. I saved the clip. I stood up. "Toby," I said, "pack up. We're not waiting for Mike." "Where are we going?" "We're going to the one place she won't look," I said. "We're going to the lion's den." I wasn't going to surrender. I was going to attack. And I was going to use that wink to tear her world apart. I had my hand on the brass handle of the hotel room door, ready to turn it, when the world outside exploded into a cacophony of sirens. The sound was not distant. It was immediate, vibrating through the thin walls of the Holiday Inn like a physical assault. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but the red and blue lights were flashing against the window curtains, painting the room in a strobe of panic. They had found us. The digital footprint of the tracking plates, or perhaps the ping of my phone when I checked the bank notification, had given us away. I looked at Toby, who was standing by the bed with his small backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked at me with absolute trust, expecting me to have a magic trick up my sleeve. But I was out of tricks. I was a 68-year-old man in a cheap motel room surrounded by the entire NYPD. I moved Toby away from the door. I told him to stand in the corner behind the heavy armchair. I told him to be brave. I told him that no matter what happened, he had to remember the truth. He nodded, his eyes wide and terrified. I smoothed my jacket. I buttoned my suit. If I was going down, I was going down looking like William Carter, not like the fugitive they painted me to be. The knock at the door was not a request. It was a battering ram. "Open the door, police." The wood splintered. I unlocked it before they could kick it in. I raised my hands. I did not want to give them any excuse. I did not want a trigger-happy rookie to mistake my wallet for a gun. 6 officers poured into the room. Tactical vests, assault rifles. The shouting was deafening. "Get down. Hands on your head. Turn around." They treated me like a terrorist. They shoved me against the wall. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked around my wrists, biting into the skin. I did not fight. Fighting would only prove Vanessa's narrative. I stayed silent. I looked for the commanding officer. Then the sea of blue uniforms parted, and she walked in. Vanessa. She was not wearing handcuffs. She was not being questioned. She was wearing a beige trench coat, huddled into herself, acting the part of the traumatized victim perfectly. A police captain was guiding her, his hand gently on her back. She looked at me, and then she looked at Toby. She let out a sob that sounded so real it almost made me doubt my own sanity. "Oh, thank God," she cried, rushing past the officers. "Toby, baby, Mommy is here." Toby shrank back into the corner. He screamed, "Get away from me! You tried to burn us." The room went silent. The officers looked at the boy, then at the mother, then at me. This was the moment. The truth was out. A child does not lie about something like that. But Vanessa did not flinch. She did not get angry. She turned to the captain, tears streaming down her face, and pointed at me. "See," she whispered. "He has brainwashed him. He has been telling him these crazy stories all night." My poor baby. He is terrified. The captain nodded sympathetically. He looked at me with disgust. Mr. Carter, you are under arrest for kidnapping and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent. I spoke then. My voice was calm, cold, and authoritative. I am not kidnapping my son, Captain. I am protecting him. My wife attempted to murder us last night. I have video evidence on a secure server, if you check my iPad. Vanessa interrupted me. She pulled a thick manila envelope from her bag. Her hands were shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the gamble she was about to take. "Officer, please," she said. "He does not know what he is saying. He is sick. We have been trying to keep it private to protect his dignity, but it has gotten so bad." She handed the envelope to the captain. He opened it. I craned my neck to see. It was a medical file. It had the logo of a prominent neurological clinic in Manhattan. "What is this?" I asked. "It is your file," Vanessa said, looking at me with eyes full of fake pity. "From Dr. Aris." The diagnosis. I had never met a Dr. Aris in my life. The captain read the summary out loud. Patient William Carter. Diagnosis: early onset Alzheimer's disease with paranoid delusions and aggressive tendencies. Stage 2. Recommendation: immediate custodial care. It was a forgery, a masterpiece of lies bought and paid for with the $50,000 she had stolen from me. It was the nuclear option. It explained everything. My flight, my accusations, my paranoia about the gas. To the police, I was not a victim. I was a confused, sick old man acting out a violent fantasy. "That is a lie," I said, my voice rising. "I have never seen that, doctor. That is a forged document." The captain looked at the paper, then at me. "It looks official, Mr. Carter. Signed and notarized." "It is fake," I shouted. "She paid a forger. His name is Paul Hayes. Check the dates." Vanessa shook her head, burying her face in her hands. "See," she sobbed. "The paranoia. He thinks everyone is conspiring against him. He thinks I am trying to kill him. He thinks the doctors are fake. It is the disease talking." The officers looked at each other. They made their choice. They chose the weeping mother with the official documents over the shouting old man in handcuffs. "Secure him," the captain ordered. "Get the boy to his mother." "No," I roared, struggling against the cuffs. "Do not give him to her. She will hurt him." "Toby, run." Toby tried to run. He tried to dodge the officer reaching for him, but he was 8 years old. The officer grabbed him gently, but firmly. "It is okay, son," the officer said. "Daddy is just sick. Mommy is going to take you home." "No, she is not," Toby screamed, kicking and flailing. "She is a monster. Daddy, help me." Vanessa grabbed him. She hugged him tight, pinning his arms to his sides so he could not hit her. "Shh, baby, shh," she cooed. "It is okay. Daddy is having an episode. We are going home." She looked at me over Toby's shoulder, and then she did it again. Just for a second. The mask slipped. Her eyes went cold, dead, and triumphant. She mouthed 2 words. "Game over." They dragged me out of the room. They did not take me to a police car. They took me to an ambulance. That was the final insult. I was not a criminal to them. I was a patient, an invalid. They strapped me to a gurney. They buckled the restraints across my chest and legs. I watched through the open back doors of the ambulance as Vanessa walked Toby to her car. He was crying, looking back at me, reaching out his hand. I strained against the leather straps until my wrists bled. "Do not worry, Toby," I yelled, my voice cracking. "I will come for you, I promise." The paramedic slammed the doors shut. The world went dark. Inside the ambulance, the air smelled of antiseptic and despair. The siren wailed a mournful sound that matched the screaming in my head. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe. Panic was her weapon. Logic was mine. She had won the battle. She had the boy. She had the narrative. She had me in chains. But she had made a mistake. She had handed that medical file to a police captain. It was now evidence. It was in the system. And if I could prove it was fake, I could prove everything. She thought she was sending me to a hole where I would rot. She thought the psych ward would break me. She thought that by the time I got out, she would have sold the house, liquidated the assets, and vanished. She did not know about Sarah Jenkins. She did not know about the blind trust. She did not know that the house she was taking Toby back to did not belong to her anymore. And most importantly, she did not know that I had bought Gavin's debt. I stopped fighting the straps. I lay still. Let them take me. Let them process me. Let them lock me up for 72 hours. It gave me time. Vanessa Carter had played the dementia card. She had bet everything on the idea that no one would believe a crazy man. But crazy men do not have the best lawyers in New York. Crazy men do not have forensic accountants. And crazy men do not have the patience of a sniper. I would sit in that cell. I would take their tests. I would eat their food. And while she was popping champagne celebrating her victory, I would be preparing the final blow. The ambulance turned a corner, and I felt the shift in momentum. I was not going to a prison. I was going to a command center. I just needed one phone call. Just one. And then the real game would begin. I whispered my son's name into the darkness of the ambulance. Hold on, Toby. Dad is just getting started. The steel doors of the Bellevue psychiatric ward slammed shut with a finality that echoed in the hollow of my chest. The sound was heavy industrial, the sound of a tomb sealing. I was stripped of my bespoke charcoal suit, my tie, my belt, and my shoelaces. They took my watch, a Patek Philippe, that had marked the time of every major deal I had closed in 40 years. They took my phone, my connection to the outside world, my lifeline to my son. In exchange, I was given paper slippers and a blue hospital gown that smelled of industrial bleach and the sweat of 1,000 desperate souls before me. I was no longer William Carter, the titan of New York real estate. I was patient 409, a 72-hour hold, a man stamped with the label of dementia and violence. I sat on the edge of the narrow cot in the observation room. The walls were painted a color I call institutional beige, a shade designed to suck the hope out of the air. There was a camera in the corner, its red eye unblinking, watching me. I knew Vanessa was not watching this feed, but I knew she was sleeping soundly, for the first time in days, believing she had finally won. She had the house. She had the boy. And she had the old man locked away in a padded box where no one would listen to his ravings about gas leaks and murder plots. A young doctor entered the room an hour later. Dr. Evans. He looked like he was 12 years old, with a stethoscope around his neck that looked too heavy for him. He held a clipboard, the holy scripture of my demise. He looked at me with that specific brand of condescending pity reserved for the senile. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice slow and loud as if I were deaf. "Do you know where you are?" I looked at him. I calculated the distance between us. I calculated the odds of convincing him. 0. He had the file Vanessa had forged. In his mind, the narrative was already written. I am in the psychiatric intake wing of Bellevue Hospital. I said, my voice level and calm. It is Saturday. I am here because my wife filed a false report claiming I have Alzheimer's to cover up her attempt to murder me and my son with a gas explosion. Dr. Evans didn't blink. He just scribbled on his clipboard. He nodded as if I had just confirmed his hypothesis. Gas explosion, he muttered, writing it down. Paranoid delusions. Persecutory complex. I realized then that fighting the diagnosis was a trap. Every denial was proof of the disease. Every logical argument was interpreted as a lucid interval in a declining mind. I stopped talking. I realized that my freedom would not come from convincing a resident doctor. It would come from the outside. I needed my phone call. Under the law, even on a psychiatric hold, I had the right to contact legal counsel. They could not strip me of that, not without violating my civil rights, and even Vanessa's forgery couldn't suspend the Constitution. I waited. I sat in silence for 3 hours. I ate the tray of lukewarm meatloaf they slid through the slot. I did not throw it. I did not yell. I proved to the camera that I was patient. Finally, a nurse came in. She was older, tired-looking. "I need to call my lawyer," I said. She nodded. She led me to a wall phone in the hallway. It had a short cord. She stood 3 feet away, arms crossed. I dialed Sarah Jenkins. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was tight with panic. "Bill, oh my God. I have been calling every precinct in the city. Mike told me they took you. I am drafting a writ of habeas corpus right now. I can have a judge sign it within the hour. We will get you out. We will sue the city. We will sue the department." "Sarah, stop," I said. The command was sharp. It cut through her panic. "Do not file the writ," I said. There was a silence on the line. "What, Bill, you are in a psych ward. You are 72. You cannot stay there." "I need to stay here," I said. "Bill, listen to me. Vanessa has filed for emergency temporary guardianship. If you are in there, she wins. She gets control of the person. She gets control of the assets that aren't in the trust. She gets Toby. She already has Toby," I said, my voice cracking slightly at the thought of my son. "And she thinks she has won. That is exactly where I need her. If you pull me out now, she goes on the defensive. She lawyers up. She hides the money she has stashed. She destroys evidence. I need her to feel safe. I need her to think the game is over so she gets careless." "But Bill..." "Listen to me, Sarah. I have a job for you, and it is not getting me out. I need you to go to Brooklyn." "Brooklyn, why? I need you to find Gavin." "Gavin, the trainer. The lover, Bill, he is a co-conspirator. He is not going to talk to me. He will talk to you," I said, "because you are going to make him an offer he cannot refuse." I lowered my voice, turning my back to the nurse. "Sarah, do you remember the construction project on the waterfront last year? The one where we had trouble with the local unions?" "Yes." "Do you remember I told you I had to make a deal to get the cement trucks through?" "Yes." "Well, during that deal I met some interesting people. People who lend money to people who cannot get loans from banks. People who do not use credit scores but use baseball bats as collateral." "Bill, where is this going?" "About a week ago, when I first started suspecting Vanessa, I ran a full background check on Gavin. Not just a credit check. A deep dive. I found out he has a gambling problem. A big one. He likes to bet on ponies and underground poker." I paused, letting the information sink in. He was in the hole for $200,000 to a Russian syndicate operating out of Brighton Beach. They were getting ready to break his legs. That is why he agreed to help Vanessa kill me. She promised him a cut of the insurance money to pay off the debt. He is not a killer, Sarah. He is a desperate man with a death sentence hanging over his head. "Okay," Sarah said slowly. "So he is desperate. That makes him dangerous." "No," I said. "That makes him mine. 3 days ago, I bought his debt." Silence again. Long, heavy silence. "You did what Sarah whispered. I contacted the syndicate through my fixer. I paid them $200,000 cash. I bought the note. I own his debt. I own him. Technically, I am the shark now." I took a deep breath. The nurse was looking at her watch. I had to wrap this up. "Sarah, go find him. He is probably at the gym or at a bar drinking away his guilt. Show him the note. Tell him that William Carter is the holder of his debt. Tell him that if he does not testify, If he does not give you everything, the texts, the emails, the recordings, the video of them buying the gasoline, then I will collect. And tell him I do not want money." "And what do you offer him?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and admiration. "You offer him a clean slate," I said. "You tell him I will forgive the debt. Entirely. And I will give him a one-way ticket to Thailand and $50,000 in walking around money. But he has to turn on her. Today. Right now. He has to give you the silver bullet. Bill, this is extortion." "No," I said. "This is business. Vanessa is playing checkers. I am playing chess. Go get him, Sarah. And do not come back for me until you have his confession on video." I hung up the phone. The nurse looked at me. "Time is up, Mr. Carter." I nodded. I walked back to my room. I lay down on the cot. I stared at the ceiling. 72 hours. For the next 3 days, I would be a ghost. I would be a number. I would let them poke me and prod me. I would answer their questions with vague, confused answers to keep the charade alive. I would let Vanessa pop the champagne. I would let her sell the furniture. I would let her think she had pulled off the perfect crime. Because I knew something she didn't. I knew that in a dark bar in Brooklyn, my lawyer was about to walk in and drop a nuclear bomb on her lover's table. I knew that Gavin was a coward. He did not love Vanessa. He loved his kneecaps. When faced with the choice between prison for attempted murder or freedom in a tropical country, he would sing like a canary. Vanessa thought she was protected by the silence of the dead. She did not know that the dead man was bankrolling her boyfriend's exit strategy. I closed my eyes. I thought of Toby. I imagined him in his room, scared alone with that woman. "Hold on, son," I whispered into the stale air of the psych ward. "Just a little longer." The plan was in motion. The trap was sprung. And when I walked out of these doors, I would not just be a free man. I would be the grim reaper of her entire existence. While I lay on a cot in a sterile room in Manhattan, counting the seconds, until my release, my lawyer Sarah Jenkins was walking into a dive bar in Brighton Beach called the Iron Horse. It was the kind of place where the floor was sticky with spilled beer, and the air was thick with the smell of stale smoke and bad decisions. It was 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, and the patrons were mostly dock workers and Russians who did not want to be found. In the back corner booth sat Gavin. I was not there, but Sarah described the scene to me with such precision that I can see it as clearly as if I were watching it on a security feed. Gavin looked terrible. The arrogant personal trainer who had strutted around my home gym in tight shirts was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He was wearing a hoodie pulled low over his eyes, and his hands were shaking as he lifted a glass of cheap whiskey to his lips. He was checking the door every 30 seconds, expecting to see a man with a baseball bat or a badge. He was terrified. Sarah adjusted her silk scarf and walked straight to his table. She did not ask for permission. She slid into the booth opposite him and placed her crocodile skin briefcase on the scarred wooden table. Gavin jumped. He spilled half his drink. He looked at her with wide, bloodshot eyes. "Who are you?" he stammered. "I am the person who is going to decide if you live or die tonight," Sarah said calmly. Her voice was low, cutting through the noise of the jukebox playing an old rock song. Gavin tried to muster some of his old bravado. "Get lost, lady. I am waiting for someone." "I know," Sarah said. "You are waiting for Yuri. Or maybe Nikolai. You are waiting for the men you owe $200,000 to. You are waiting for them to come and drag you into the alley and break your knees." Gavin went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast, it looked like he might faint. "How do you know that?" he whispered. "Because I paid them," Sarah said. She opened her briefcase. She pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a promissory note. The original document Gavin had signed with the loan sharks 6 months ago. It had his signature scrawled at the bottom in shaky ink. Across the front, stamped in red ink, were the words, "Paid in full." Gavin stared at the paper. He reached out a trembling hand to touch it, but Sarah pulled it back. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice barely a squeak. "I am William Carter's lawyer," Sarah said. "And Mr. Carter sends his regards." Gavin recoiled as if she had slapped him. He looked around the bar, expecting me to jump out from the shadows. "But he is crazy," he hissed. "Vanessa said he is in the psych ward." "She said he is finished. He is resting," Sarah corrected him. "He is taking a nap while I clean up his mess. And right now, Gavin, you are the biggest mess on the table." She leaned forward. She locked eyes with him. "Here is the situation. My client, William Carter, bought your debt this afternoon. He owns you. He owns your car. He owns your apartment. He owns your future earnings. And technically, he owns your physical safety because the people he bought this note from were very clear that if the debt transferred, the enforcement rights transferred with it." Gavin swallowed hard. He looked like a trapped animal. "What does he want?" he asked. "Does he want money?" "I do not have it. Vanessa said once the insurance pays out, I can pay everyone back." Sarah laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Vanessa lied to you, Gavin. There is no insurance payout coming. William changed the beneficiary yesterday morning. And there is no house to inherit." He transferred the title. "Vanessa is broke. She has nothing. And by extension, you have nothing." Gavin shook his head in denial. "No. That is impossible. She said it was a done deal. She said the old man was senile. She said we just had to wait a few days." "She is playing you," Sarah said. "She is setting you up. Think about it, Gavin. Who bought the gasoline? You did. Who loosened the valve? You did. Who is on camera walking out of the hardware store? You are. When the police finally put the pieces together, who do you think she is going to blame? The grieving widow or the desperate boyfriend with a gambling problem?" Gavin stared at his hands. The reality was sinking in. He was not a partner. He was a pawn. And he was about to be sacrificed. "I have an offer for you," Sarah said. She reached into her briefcase again. This time she pulled out a thick envelope and a folder. She placed the envelope on the table. It was heavy. It was filled with $50,000 in used, non-sequential bills. Next to it, she placed a plane ticket. First class. One way. New York to Bangkok, leaving tonight at midnight. "What is this?" Gavin asked, staring at the money. "This is your exit strategy," Sarah said. "Option A is you stay here. You keep trusting Vanessa. In about 48 hours, the police will link you to the attempted murder. You will go to prison for 20 years. Or maybe you do not go to prison. Maybe you just stay here in Brooklyn and owe William Carter $200,000. And trust me, William is not as forgiving as the Russians." Gavin shuddered. Option B. Sarah continued tapping the ticket. "You take this money, you take this ticket, you go to Thailand, you start over. The cost of living is low. 50 grand will last you a long time. The debt is forgiven, wiped clean. You are free." Gavin looked at the ticket. He looked at the money. He looked at Sarah. "What do I have to do? You have to give me everything," Sarah said. She held out her hand. "Your phone, your passcode, and a video confession right now. I want you to tell me everything. The plan, the dates, what Vanessa said, what she promised you. I want you to tell me about I want you to tell me about the forgery." Gavin hesitated. He looked at his phone sitting on the table. It was his lifeline to Vanessa. It was filled with their texts, their love notes, their plans. Betraying her meant admitting that everything they had done was for nothing. But then he looked at the promissory note. Paid in full. He realized in that moment that Vanessa had never offered him safety. She had only offered him risk. I was offering him a life. He picked up his phone. He unlocked it. He handed it to Sarah. "Passcode is 4499, he whispered. Sarah took the phone. She didn't smile. She just nodded. She pulled out her own phone and set it up on the table facing him. "Start talking," she said. "State your name and start from the beginning." Gavin took a shot of whiskey. He wiped his mouth. He looked into the camera lens. "My name is Gavin Miller," he began. "6 months ago, Vanessa Carter asked me if I knew how to make a house fire look like an accident." For the next 20 minutes, he sang. He poured out everything. He described the initial conversations in the gym, where Vanessa complained that I was taking too long to die. He described how she seduced him, not with love, but with promises of my wealth. He described the day she came up with the gas plan. He admitted to buying the timer. He admitted to everything. Sarah let him talk. She didn't interrupt. She just let the truth spill out onto the digital file. When he was done, he slumped back in the booth. He looked lighter, as if a physical weight had been removed from his shoulders. "Is that it?" he asked. "That is it," Sarah said. She stopped the recording. She put his phone in her bag. She pushed the envelope of money and the ticket across the table. "Go," she said. "Do not go home to pack. Do not call anyone, especially not her. Go straight to JFK. Get on that plane. If you are still in this country tomorrow morning, the deal is off and the debt is back on." Gavin grabbed the money. He stuffed it into his jacket. He grabbed the ticket. He stood up. He looked at Sarah one last time. "Tell Bill. Tell him I am sorry," he said. Sarah didn't look up from her bag. "Bill doesn't care, Gavin. Just disappear." Gavin walked out of the bar. He didn't look back. He walked out into the cool night air of Brooklyn and hailed a cab. He was gone. Sarah sat in the booth for a moment longer. She ordered a glass of water. She took a sip to wash the taste of the encounter out of her mouth. Then she pulled out her phone and sent me a text message on the secure app we used. "The bird has flown. I have the song." I received that message lying on my cot in the psych ward. I read it in the darkness, shielding the screen from the camera. A wave of pure, cold satisfaction washed over me. I had it. I had the silver bullet. Vanessa was at home, probably sleeping in my bed, or perhaps selling my art collection to a fence. She thought she was untouchable. She thought the only witness against her was a crazy old man locked in a padded room. She did not know that her lover had just sold her out for a plane ticket. She did not know that her texts, her voice notes, her digital soul were now in the possession of the most dangerous lawyer in New York. I closed my eyes. I slept for the first time in 3 days. I slept the sleep of the righteous, because tomorrow was Sunday. And on Monday morning, the courts would open. And I was going to walk into that courtroom, not as a defendant, but as the executioner. The 72 hours were almost up. The doctors would come in the morning to evaluate me. They would expect a confused man. Instead, they were going to find a man who was ready to check out. I had played the victim. I had played the patient. Now it was time to play the hand I had dealt myself. Monday morning was going to be a bloodbath, and Vanessa Carter was going to be the only casualty. While I was staring at the ceiling of the psychiatric ward, counting the cracks in the plaster, my wife was throwing a party. It was Saturday night. I was locked away. Her lover was on a plane to Thailand, and she believed she had finally won. She was the queen of the castle, and the king was in a dungeon. I was not there to witness it, but Mike O'Malley's surveillance team was still watching the exterior of the house, and what they saw confirmed everything I knew about Vanessa's soul. She did not spend the night grieving. She did not spend the night comforting our traumatized son. She spent the night liquidating my life. At 7 p.m., a black van pulled up to the service entrance of the estate. It was not a delivery truck. It belonged to a man named Silas, a fence who operated out of the Diamond District. He bought stolen luxury goods for pennies on the dollar and asked no questions. I knew him because I had helped put his brother in prison 10 years ago, but Vanessa knew him because he was the one who sold her the fake designer bags she used to impress her friends before she met me. She invited him in. She was wearing one of my silk robes, drinking a bottle of my vintage Cristal champagne straight from the glass. She was drunk on power. She walked him through the house like it was a showroom. She pointed at the oil paintings on the walls. She pointed at the sculptures. She took him into my study and opened the humidor where I kept my collection of Cuban cigars. Everything must go, she told him. I want cash. Tonight. She was desperate. My financial blockade had worked better than I expected. She had no credit cards. She had no access to the bank accounts. She had the house, but she could not eat the bricks. She needed money to pay her lawyer to pay off the forged medical file and to maintain the illusion of control. So she started selling the furniture. I can only imagine the scene inside. Silas loading my grandfather's clock into his van. Silas taking the Persian rugs. Silas emptying my jewelry box of the cufflinks and watches I had collected over 40 years. She sold my Patek Philippe, a watch worth $50,000 for $5,000 in cash. She sold the painting of the Hudson River School that hung above the fireplace for 10 grand. She was stripping the carcass before the body was even cold. She was laughing. The microphones Mike had planted near the windows picked up her laughter. It was a shrill, manic sound. She was toasting to her freedom. She was shouting that she was finally rid of the old man. She told Silas that I was rotting in Bellevue, and that by the time I got out, if I ever got out, she would be living in Europe with a new name and a new face. But while she was busy erasing my existence, she forgot about the one thing that mattered most. She forgot about Toby. She had locked him in his bedroom on the second floor. She told him he was grounded for lying to the police. She told him that if he made a sound, she would send him to a boarding school in Switzerland, where he would never see me again. She thought a locked door was enough to hold him. She underestimated him. She forgot whose blood ran in his veins. Toby was not just her son. He was my son, and he had watched me solve problems his entire life. Toby sat on his bed listening to the heavy footsteps of the strangers downstairs. He heard his mother laughing. He heard the sound of things being dragged across the hardwood floors. He knew what was happening. He knew she was bad. He knew I was in trouble. And he knew that if he stayed in that room, he was next. He went to the window. It was a sash window, old and heavy. I had taught him how to open it last summer when we were painting the frames. He pushed it up. It groaned, but it opened. He looked down. It was a 15-foot drop to the rose bushes below. Too high to jump. But there was a trellis. An old wooden lattice covered in ivy that climbed up the side of the house. I had meant to tear it down because it was a security risk, but Vanessa had insisted we keep it because it looked romantic. That vanity was about to save my son. Toby grabbed his backpack. He put his favorite toy car inside. He put a picture of us fishing in Montauk inside, and he climbed out onto the ledge. He was 8 years old. It was dark. The wind was cold. But he did not cry. He grabbed the ivy with his small hands. He found a foothold on the wood. He climbed down slowly, inch by inch, just like I had taught him on the rock wall at the summer camp. The thorns scratched his arms. The wood creaked under his weight. But he kept moving. When his feet touched the mulch of the garden bed, he did not stop to look back. He did not look at the window where his mother was selling his inheritance. He ran. He ran to the back gate, the one we had escaped through the night before. He slipped into the alleyway behind the properties. He knew where he was going. He was going to the only safe place left in the world. Mike O'Malley lived 4 blocks away in a modest brick house with a blue door. I had taken Toby there for barbecues. Toby liked Mike because Mike let him play with his retired police dog, a German shepherd named Buster. Toby ran through the dark streets of Westchester. He hid behind cars when headlights swept the road. He was a fugitive just like his father. He was cold and he was scared, but he was driven by a single purpose. He had to save me. At 9:30 p.m., Mike O'Malley was sitting in his living room reviewing the security footage from my house when he heard a scratching at his front door. It was low and frantic. He thought it was a raccoon. He opened the door, prepared to shoo it away. Instead, he found my son. Toby was shivering. His dinosaur t-shirt was torn. His face was streaked with dirt and tears. He looked up at Mike and said two words that broke the big ex-cop's heart. "Help, Dad." Mike scooped him up. He pulled him inside and locked the door. He checked the street. No one had followed him. He carried Toby into the kitchen and wrapped him in a blanket. He gave him a cup of hot cocoa. He called Sarah Jenkins immediately. "We have the boy," Mike said, his voice rough with emotion. He broke out. "He is safe." Sarah was at her office preparing the final affidavits for the morning. When she heard the news, she let out a breath she had been holding for 2 days. "Keep him there," Sarah ordered. "Do not call the police. Do not call child services. Vanessa has reported him as safe in her custody. If we call them now, they will return him to her until the court hearing. We cannot risk that. Keep him hidden. Bring him to court tomorrow morning. He is our witness." Mike looked at Toby. The boy was drinking the cocoa, his hands shaking. "You did good, kid," Mike said. "You did real good. Your dad is going to be so proud of you." Toby looked up. "Is my dad okay?" "He is going to be fine," Mike promised. "We are going to get him back tomorrow. But tonight, you are staying here with Buster. No one is going to hurt you." Back at the mansion, Vanessa was finishing her sale. Silas handed her a thick envelope of cash. It was about $40,000, a fraction of what the items were worth, but enough to keep her floating for a few weeks. Enough to pay for flight tickets if she needed to run. She showed him out. She locked the door. She felt triumphant. She had cash. She had the house. She had eliminated the husband. She walked up the stairs, a glass of champagne in her hand. She went to Toby's door. She wanted to check on her prisoner. She wanted to make sure he was still broken and compliant. She unlocked the door. "Toby," she said, her voice slurring slightly from the alcohol. "Mommy has a surprise for you." She pushed the door open. The room was empty. The curtains were blowing in the night breeze. The window was wide open. She dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, spraying champagne everywhere. She ran to the window. She looked down. She saw the crushed ivy. She saw the footprints in the mulch. She screamed. It was not a scream of fear for her child. It was a scream of rage. He was gone. Her leverage was gone. Her prop for the grieving mother act was gone. She ran downstairs. She ran out into the street. She looked up and down the road. It was empty. She pulled out her phone. She was about to dial 911 again to report him missing for real this time, but her thumb hovered over the call button. If she called the police now, she would have to admit that she lost him. She would have to admit that he escaped. They would ask why the window was open. They would ask why she didn't hear him. They would see the empty spaces on the walls where the paintings used to be. They would see the cash on the table. She couldn't call the police. Not yet. She was trapped in her own lie. She had told the world she was a protective mother, saving her son from a madman. If the world found out the son ran away from her to get away from her safety, her story would crumble. She lowered the phone. She started to pace. She needed to find him herself. He couldn't have gone far. He was 8. She got into her car. She started driving around the neighborhood, slowly scanning the sidewalks. She looked for hours. She drove past the park. She drove past the school. She drove past his friends' houses, but she never drove past Mike O'Malley's house. She didn't know Mike lived there. She didn't know Mike existed. To her, I was a lonely old man with no friends. She never bothered to learn the names of the people who actually cared about me. By 3 a.m., she returned to the empty house. She was exhausted. She was terrified. But she convinced herself of one thing: he would come back. He was a child. He would get cold and hungry and come back. Or the police would find him and bring him back, and she would spin a story about how he sleepwalked. She sat in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of the furniture she had sold, clutching the envelope of cash. She waited for the sun to rise. She didn't know that the sun was rising on her judgment day. While she sat there plotting her next lie, Mike was ironing a small suit for Toby. Sarah was printing the final exhibits, and I was sitting on my cot in Bellevue shaving with a disposable razor, preparing my face for the cameras. The 72 hours were up at 8 a.m. The hearing was at 9. Vanessa would be there. She had to be. She was the petitioner. She would walk in expecting to be handed the keys to the kingdom. She would expect to see me in a straitjacket, drooling and confused. Instead, she was going to see me standing tall. She was going to see her lover on a video screen confessing to everything. And she was going to see her son sitting next to the man she tried to kill, holding the hand of the man who was going to put her in prison. The party was over. The bill was due, and I was coming to collect. The mahogany doors of the family court hearing room were heavy and imposing, but they felt like paper compared to the weight of the lies being spun inside. It was 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. The 72-hour psychiatric hold was technically over, but Vanessa had filed an emergency ex parte motion to extend it and to grant her temporary guardianship over my person and my estate. She wasn't just trying to keep me locked up. She was trying to become my warden. I wasn't in the room when it started. My lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, had arranged for my release at 8:01 a.m., presenting the judge with 3 independent affidavits from psychiatrists who had interviewed me over the weekend. They all concluded that I was not only sane, but possessed an intellect sharper than most men half my age. But Vanessa didn't know that yet. I stood outside the double doors, adjusting the cuffs of the fresh suit Mike had brought me. I listened to the proceedings through the crack. Your Honor, Vanessa's lawyer was saying, his voice dripping with professional concern. We are dealing with a tragedy. Mr. Carter is a danger to himself and others. His dementia has progressed rapidly. He has kidnapped the child. He has made wild accusations about murder plots. Mrs. Carter is terrified. She just wants to bring her husband home and get him the care he needs. I heard a sob. It was Vanessa. It was a perfect sob. Not too loud, not too dramatic, just a soft, heartbroken sound that suggested a woman at the end of her rope. I pushed the doors open. The sound of my leather shoes on the parquet floor was like a gunshot in a library. Every head turned. Vanessa was sitting at the plaintiff's table wearing a black dress that was modest and severe. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like a saint who had been dragged through hell. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. For a second, the mask slipped and I saw the pure, unadulterated fear. But she recovered instantly. She shrank back into her chair, clutching her lawyer's arm. "Oh God," she whispered loud enough for the microphone to catch. "He is here. Please do not let him hurt me." The bailiff moved to intercept me, but the judge raised a hand. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, "you are late, and you are supposed to be in Bellevue." "I was discharged, Your Honor," I said, my voice calm and carrying to the back of the room. "I am here to contest the motion, and I am here to present evidence that this entire hearing is based on a fraud." Vanessa's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. Mr. Carter is not mentally competent to represent himself. We have medical records. The records are forged," I said, cutting him off, "and I can prove it. But first, I would like to show the court the character of the woman asking for control over my life." I walked to the defense table where Sarah was waiting. She looked at me and nodded. She plugged her laptop into the court's presentation system. Vanessa looked confused. She was expecting me to rant about gas leaks. She was ready to call it a delusion. She had her rebuttal prepared. It was a deepfake, she would say. He is paranoid. But I wasn't going to show the gas video. That was for the criminal trial. For family court, I needed something visceral. Something that proved she wasn't a worried wife but a sociopathic actress. Your Honor, I said. My wife claims she is terrified. She claims she loves me. She claims her tears are real. I would like to play a video recovered from the cloud account of Mr. Gavin Miller. Vanessa froze. The name hit her harder than a slap. Gavin. Her lover. Her accomplice. She looked at the door expecting him to walk in. But Gavin was gone. He was halfway to Thailand. But he had left a parting gift. Sarah hit play. The large screens on the wall flickered to life. The video was shaky at first, shot on a phone in portrait mode. It showed a bedroom. My bedroom. Vanessa was standing in front of the full-length mirror. She was wearing the same white sweater she had worn on the news during the Amber Alert. But she wasn't crying. She was holding a bottle of eye drops. In the video, Vanessa tilted her head back and squeezed 2 drops into her eyes. She blinked rapidly. Then she looked at her reflection. She adjusted her hair, making it look messy. She pulled at the collar of her sweater to make it look askew. Then she started to breathe heavily. She contorted her face. Please, she practiced to the mirror, her voice trembling. Please, Bill, just bring him home. She stopped. She shook her head. No, that is too desperate. Dial it back. She tried again. Please, Bill. We love you. She smiled at her reflection. A cold, satisfied smile. Got it, she whispered. That is the money shot. The video ended. The courtroom was silent. A silence so deep it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The judge was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open. The court stenographer had stopped typing. Vanessa was not moving. She was staring at the black screen, her face pale as a sheet. But I wasn't done. And Your Honor, I said, I would like to submit into evidence a text message thread between Mrs. Carter and Mr. Miller dated 3 days ago. Sarah clicked the next slide. The text messages appeared on the screen, huge and undeniable. Sent by Vanessa, is the old man dead, yet sent by Gavin, not yet. We have to wait for the timer. Sent Mom. Vanessa. I am so sick of this. I am sick of pretending to sleep with him. His skin feels like paper. I just want him gone so we can sell the house and leave. Sent by Vanessa, make sure it looks like an accident. I do not want to deal with an investigation. The collective gasp in the courtroom was audible. Vanessa's lawyer slowly moved his chair away from her, as if she were contagious. I looked at Vanessa. She wasn't crying now. There were no fake tears. There was no performance. There was only the raw, naked hatred of a predator who had been trapped. She stood up. She didn't look at the judge. She looked at me. You bastard, she hissed. You ruined everything. Mrs. Carter, sit down, the judge roared, slamming his gavel. She didn't sit. She lunged. She lunged across the table toward me, her fingers curled into claws. It was a moment of pure madness, a break from reality. The bailiff tackled her before she got halfway. He pinned her to the ground. Get off me, she screamed, kicking and thrashing. It is my money. I earned it. I put up with him for 10 years. It is mine. I stood there straightening my tie. I looked down at the woman I had once loved, the woman who had shared my bed and mothered my child. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the cold satisfaction of a job finished. The judge was standing now, pointing a finger at the bailiff. Take her into custody immediately. I am revoking bail. I am issuing a bench warrant for attempted murder and fraud." As they dragged her up from the floor, she looked at me one last time. Her hair was wild, her dress torn. "You are dead, William," she screamed. "You hear me? You are dead!" I looked her in the eye. "I am not dead, Vanessa," I said softly. "I am just divorced." They dragged her out of the double doors, her screams echoing down the hallway. The judge looked at me. He looked at the screen where the text messages were still glowing. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, his voice shaking slightly, "the motion for guardianship is denied with prejudice. I am granting you full temporary custody of the minor child, and I am recommending that the district attorney review this evidence for immediate criminal prosecution." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. I gathered my papers. I nodded to Sarah. We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was quiet. The air felt cleaner. I had won. But there was one last thing to do. One last nail to hammer into the coffin of her greed. She thought she was fighting for a fortune. She didn't know yet that the fortune was already gone. She didn't know about the house. I walked toward the exit, where Mike was waiting with Toby. It was time to deliver the final blow, and I wanted to look her in the eye when I did it. The bailiffs hauled her up from the floor. Her knees were weak, buckling under the weight of her new reality, but her mouth was still working. Even in handcuffs, even facing 20 years in a federal penitentiary for attempted murder, Vanessa Carter was still a gold digger. She twisted in the grip of the officers, her eyes locking onto mine, with a venomous desperation. "I want my half," she screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings of the courthouse. "You cannot cut me out, William. New York is an equitable distribution state. That house in Westchester is marital property. It is worth $4 million. I want my 50%. If I am going to prison, I am going as a rich woman. I will use it to buy the best appeals lawyer in the country. You hear me, old man? I own half of everything." She was frantic, clinging to the one thing she had valued above all else. Money. She thought she still had a parachute. She thought that even if she lost her freedom, she had won the financial war. I signaled the bailiffs to wait. I walked over to her slowly. I did not look angry. I did not look sad. I looked like a CEO closing a hostile takeover. I stepped into her personal space close enough to smell the fierce sweat that had replaced her expensive perfume. I leaned in close to her ear. I wanted this to be intimate. I wanted to be the only one to hear the sound of her soul breaking. "Vanessa," I whispered, "do you remember last week when you came into my office to sign the paperwork for the life insurance policy update? You were so excited. You were so focused on the $10 million payout that you barely looked at the other documents in the stack." She froze. Her eyes darted back and forth, searching my face. There was a document on the bottom. I continued, my voice smooth and cold. It was a quitclaim deed. You signed it, Vanessa. You notarized it. You voluntarily relinquished all claims rights and interest in the Westchester property. Her jaw dropped. "No," she breathed. "That is a lie." "It was recorded this morning at the county clerk office," I said. "The house does not belong to us anymore. It belongs to the Phoenix Group, a limited liability company. And do you know who the sole shareholder of that company is?" I stepped back and pointed at the bench where Mike O'Malley was sitting with his arm around my son. "It belongs to Toby," I said. Vanessa looked at her son. For the first time, she did not see a pawn. She saw the owner of the empire she had tried to steal. "And there is one more thing," I added, delivering the final stroke. "Since you are no longer an owner, you are liable for damages. The Phoenix Group just filed a civil suit against you for the destruction of private property. Specifically, the gas lines you cut and the structural damage you caused during your failed arson attempt. We are suing you for $500,000 in repairs and punitive damages." I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf who had finally eaten the hunter. You are not leaving this marriage with half a house, Vanessa. You are leaving with a $500,000 debt to your own son. You are bankrupt. You are homeless. And you are going to jail. The scream she let out was not human. It was the sound of an animal caught in a trap, realizing the bone is broken. Her legs gave out completely. The bailiffs had to drag her out of the room, her heels scraping against the floor, her wails fading into the distance until the heavy doors slammed shut, sealing her fate. I stood there for a moment in the silence. It was done. The termite had been exterminated. The foundation held. I turned to Sarah Jenkins. She was packing up her laptop, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "Good work, Bill," she said. I nodded. "Send the bill to the trust." I walked over to the bench. Toby jumped down. He looked tired. He looked older than 8, but he looked safe. "Is she gone, Dad?" he asked. "Yes, son," I said, taking his hand. "She is gone. She can never hurt us again." Mike stood up and shook my hand. His grip was firm. "You played a hell of a game, Mr. Carter." "I did not play Mike," I said. "I survived." We walked out of the courthouse together. The heavy oak doors pushed open into the midday sun. The light was blinding after the dim interior of the courtroom. The air was crisp and cold, smelling of exhaust and hot dog carts, the smell of New York City, the smell of life. Reporters were waiting at the bottom of the steps. They shouted my name. They asked for a statement. They wanted the scoop on the billionaire who trapped his murderous wife. I ignored them. I put my sunglasses on. I lifted Toby into the back of the waiting town car. As I climbed in beside him, I looked back at the courthouse one last time. There was no forgiveness in my heart. There was no lingering affection. There was only the cold, hard clarity of justice. I had protected what was mine. I had cut out the rot. I looked at Toby. He was leaning his head on my shoulder. "Dad," he said, "can we go home now?" I smiled. For the first time in days, it was a real smile. "Not to the old house, son," I said. "We are going to find a new home, a fortress, just for us." The car pulled away into the traffic, merging into the stream of the city. I was William Carter. I was 68 years old. I was a single father, and I had never felt stronger. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you think Vanessa got what she deserved. And remember, sometimes the person sleeping next to you is the one you need to watch the closest. Stay safe and never underestimate the quiet ones. In the world of high-stakes business, I thought I could spot a liar from a mile away, but the most dangerous enemy was sleeping in my own bed. This experience taught me that true wealth isn't measured in skyscrapers or bank accounts, but in the unwavering loyalty of those who stand by you when the fire rises. I learned that trust is not a given right. It is earned through action. And most importantly, I learned that sometimes the smallest voice in the room, my 8-year-old son, is the only one telling the truth. Protect those who protect you and never let love blind you to reality. If this story of justice resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of betrayal and redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments. Did Vanessa get what she deserved?